Hello, this is our third installment of Dialogic Pedagogy podcast. And today's topic, based on majority of the vote, is diverse versions and types of dialogic pedagogy. Are you ready for that?
More or less, we'll see.
So, Eugene, tell us about what are these diverse versions of dialogic pedagogy, please.
And also, we're going to discuss kind of what's good and what's bad about each of them,
Yes.
because that's important. And I don't know whether or not we will be able to
Go through all of them in detail.
Yes, in details. So if people like, we will continue. Although next time we want to announce that we will try to do live, and maybe it will be open topic, so we will not have a topic. So maybe if people want to continue this particular topic, maybe we should, it will be our fifth podcast rather than fourth. Right. Or maybe it will be fourth.
Well, this is an experiment, because we never did Facebook Live for anything else, either one of us. Yeah. So we will see how that will work for everyone, for us and for you.
Yes. Okay, that's very interesting question about diverse dialogic pedagogy approaches and visions. I just want to remind you that the way how we see dialogic pedagogy as in very broad sense, it's a communal concept. It doesn't belong to any of us. It's like whoever thinks that dialogue is important for pedagogy or even education in general becomes by default a part of our family of dialogic pedagogy approaches. So far I observed two major dialogic pedagogy approaches. One of them I called as instrumental dialogic pedagogy, and another non-instrumental, which is probably not a very good term, but maybe someone will come to better term if you like this distinguish.
Maybe we could call it really intrinsic dialogic pedagogy, because it's not serving anything else like instrument for something else, but it's intrinsic to itself.
That may be a good idea. Yeah, that sounds like an interesting approach, which is we start developing that. And maybe other people might find something besides intrinsic and instrumental dialogic pedagogy as well. So let me start with intrinsic. I'm sorry, with instrumental dialogic pedagogy. In instrumental dialogic pedagogy, by definition, it's dialogue is viewed as a means for achieving some goals, and that's goals are usually non-dialogic in my point of view. And so far, I could observe only two types of instrumental dialogic pedagogy. The one is I would call epistemological, which is the idea is that there is some kind of knowledge that students supposed to know at the end of the lesson or end of the school and the end of the term and so forth.
But the predefined knowledge.
Yes, that knowledge is predefined. It's like addition of the fractions or one of the first, I would say, at least known to us, well-documented case of instrumental dialogic pedagogy probably was captured by Plato in his famous dialogue Meno. And specifically it was done between Socrates and the slave, whom he called boy, which is I found being a very common address of male slaves across different cultures and societies. So we actually don't know how old that boy maybe was 70 years old. We don't know that. But in this case, the Socrates want to demonstrate Meno that the slave kind of knows the formula for area of the square, and just need to remember that. And for kind of dialogic questioning, Socrates managed to move the slave to the formula.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of the good example of instrumental dialogic pedagogy, and specifically epistemological one. Another type of instrumental dialogic pedagogy, I call it social justice pedagogy. And the focus become not the endpoint, curricular endpoint in this instrumental dialogic pedagogy. It's not knowledge particular, but beliefs and dispositions and values, I would say values, which is again preset in advance. It's about tolerance, it's about liberation, it's about equality, human rights, respect for human rights, and so on and so forth. Of course, they can be not that kind of leftist. That could be on the right as well. Like Nazi actually also had this idea of the social justice. In this case, their social justice program values would be rather different. It will be about national values, nationalism, tribalism, and whatever, their values. But the idea again,
well, it doesn't have to be so right. It could be just very conservative values like patriotism to the country, which is. And one of the things that I find about social justice, instrumental dialogic approach, is that if you don't agree with the ideology of the teachers or the school, you may call it brainwashing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and for example, one of the for me one of the good example of this approach is kind of beloved Paulo Freire, and especially become very evident that instrumentalism of his approach when he worked in Guinea-Bissau after communist. You can call revolution, liberation, whatever you can call it, but he went there on invitation of the communist totalitarian government, and basically was brainwashed peasants with communist propaganda without absolutely unapologetically, and you can read his own text about that. What actually interesting for me always, what's common about this instrumental approach, you can see it in a full scale, not contaminated by other things, when educators have full power of the students. In case of the Socrates, one can say that he also used instrumental dialogic pedagogy not only with slave, but in my analysis, he used it with the free people as well. But it was much less visible. It was much more hidden. But with the slave, and was if you ask me like why is it was hidden, because many questions were coming from free people like Meno and his friend, and also that people could leave at any time, and it was much more energetic and much more open. With the slave never asked any question. It was always the agenda and curriculum was set up by Socrates, not by slave at all, without any participation of the slave. So the same thing with Freire. When he worked with Brazilian peasants, his instrumentality was much more hidden. As soon as he came to the totalitarian regime, when he had much more power, it's become pretty evident, this instrumentalism.
Mm-hmm.
So what your question you had about...
So what is good about, let's keep that, what is good about the instrumental dialogic pedagogy? Why is it even dialogic if you have already set agenda where you want to come to the end? Why there isn't any need for any dialogue there?
Yeah, also another question, why is it so widespread?
Yes.
Instrumentality. By the way, in this case, instrumentalism can be non-dialogic as well, without any use, and this is more traditional pedagogy. But the thing is that instrumentalism are probably much ubiquitous pedagogy than anything else. And the good question is, why is that? Well, first of all, what it can be good for? I think it's good for, and this is part why it's so ubiquitous, to make people predictable, more like working as or acting or behaving more like smart machines. In a way, one can argue that the first smart machines were humans, and now actually machines catching up to the human smart machines.
And better in some situations, like calculator, much better than.
It's not they're much better. They're much more reliable rather than better. I wouldn't call that
for certain
better.
things, in very narrow things.
Yeah, and they become in certain things they become more reliable than human machines. But this machinery of human machinery is basically on what right now economy is based. And we are actually living in the very interesting moment, in my view, when smart machines might start pushing people from necessity to be smart machines. And that's why they can become a possibility for some type of different type of education that does not need to shape people as working as a smart machines. That's one reason. Another reason, like we humans also, like besides being a subject, we are objects. We have bodies, this and that. So part of this pedagogy of for objects and instrumentality, it is pedagogy for objects. Do we need that? Absolutely, yes. This kind of education, which I would call not maybe education, maybe we should, this is probably a good idea, maybe define, maybe it's not education, maybe it's look like education, but it's not, and call it, let's say, training. Like, for example, when I want to learn new remote control, I don't want to know any, I don't want this critical dialogue about how it works, what it makes work. For me, working remote control means what I should press, what buttons I should press to make my desire realized.
But even if you think about the much more complex things, like if I want to have a reliable doctor or a reliable nurse that I know knows what other people think is the best in that moment of knowledge, or a lawyer, or all these difficult complex areas which there is some kind of a reliability that you can trust that this doctor knows what he's doing.
In my view, this type of things will be replaced by machines. Anything that reliable will be replaced by machines. Humans are unique and universally unique and meaning driven, which is dialogic, and which is absolutely unreliable, and it's authorial. And for that, machines, in my view, will not work. But anything else, what we need something reliable, it's excellent candidate for replacement by machines, which will be, in my view, with time will become better and better in doing that reliability. And it's great because humans do not exist to work as reliable machines, smart machines.
But would you want to say that the knowledge that's on the level of a smart machine is still necessary in some ways for people to make good judgments as unreliable, unique people?
Of course, like a good example is Google. Google very much can inform us to make a good authorial judgments, and they're terrific, and they kind of free us from memorization, which is, again, memorization is part of the shaping us as objects, in my view, mental objects. And that is terrific, and I hope that these smart machines will penetrate both many professions, including being a lawyer or being a doctor. And I'm a teacher. I welcome that. I think it's terrific. And I'm actually not very much upset that the jobs will disappear, because that's not doing jobs is not, in my view, human destiny. This is what machines should be, smart machines should be for.
So then I already sense what you see is bad about instrumental dialogic pedagogy.
Yeah, well, the bad thing's part of that, it's actually going against our human destiny to exactly to be unique, to transcend the given, not to shape into the given, but to transcend the given. And in this case, in education, we can learn the given by transcending that, and through the transcending that. And this is where I see limitations of any instrumental pedagogy. So you asked me about why why is it people attracted to dialogic, to dialogue, to do instrumentality?
Exactly, that's very
Yeah.
important question.
Yeah, well, basically, it's a good question, and probably have different answer for different particular educators, like, I don't know, Socrates or Paulo Freire or somebody else who is involved in instrumentality. But one thing that, so basically they're trying to subordinate, in my view, meaning making for this process of the process of the shaping people in the predictable way. And to some degree, in my view, it's kind of dangerous for them process, because meaning making escapes any shape, and it become either manipulative or rather violent meaning making process, because you need to put limits on this meaning making process. But on the other hand, meaning making process, yes, can be harmful for shaping as well. So I guess this is almost like gas and brake. You can be very careful of doing that, because again, meaning making can blow up the preset curricular endpoint to which it's moving. So
why are people even attracted? Although I know some teachers are afraid of having a lot of dialogue because it gets out of hand.
Exactly, right.
But still attracted some people a lot. Why then don't they just lecture and have exams to just?
Well, because again, alternative to the meaning making, in my view, it's pattern recognition, which is how our all our smart machines right now are working in the speech recognition, also recognition of the handwriting and many other things, important things. And this meaning making process of making smart machines without involving meaning making, yes, it is possible with humans as well. But some people want to enrich that with again, meaning making, a limited meaning making process. So they try to create this hybrid between pattern recognition and limited meaning making.
And why even? What do you need even limited meaning?
Well,
what's the value for that?
Yeah, the value of that, because if you do this only pattern recognition things, it's for doing, like, calculator doesn't know why 2 + 2 = 4, although it can perform it very beautifully and reliably and nicely. But so this kind of necessity to know why could be important, because there are many circumstances when maybe it's not a good idea to do 2 + 2 = 4, or maybe it is a good idea to do that. So, or it may be transformed to something else. So this idea of the equipping students with limited meaning making process can empower them for contextualism and for possible transcendence. Okay, but at the same time, they put a lot of brakes on that, because everything should be
still fitting into a pre-design.
Yes, and the testing is very important. I just want to attract your attention that one reason that Albert Einstein could not become a professor is because he was not doing well on the testing. And part of in my view, why he was, that's my hypothesis, why he was not doing on the testing, because he might see limitations of this pre-existing answers for this testing.
Right. In fact, actually, you probably could answer for all 4 or 5 different alternatives that they are true under some conditions, or something like that, or that none of them are true.
Right.
There is nothing.
Right. Right. In this case, it's maybe a good idea to quote Bakhtin, who talks about that meaning-making process is bottomless. So if you open this Pandora box, you will never stop, and it can go move on and on and on, which is going contra to this idea of testing, when the right answer pre-exists the testing itself.
So what makes education today, contemporary education that started, let's say, mass education 200 years ago, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, so very, very determined to shape people into particular shapes, and then on top of that, why use dialogism to contextualize it. If why shape is
Well,
not enough.
my answer again, I think I provided that. Basically, economy and bureaucracy demand shaping. But even before well, if you think about economy in very, very broad sense, even in everyday life, in terms of taking care of your own body and living, you have to, without even thinking about market and global economy, on kind of very, very local things, there is a lot of things required repetition, predictability, and so on and so forth, and kind of behaving as a smart object, which is smart machine is. So all of these pressures put for the instrumentality, and they ask you why it's nevertheless the focus on dialogicity, because that instrumentality creates not very smart machines. So in a way, you need to a little bit jump out of this and to think about how it can be better. Like even if you think about the best smart machines, I would say, which is animals, and they're still limited within their own biological niche and so on and so forth. And humans, and that's unique about them, they can transcend that. So transcendence is the essence of the human nature, and that's why like making perfect smart machines is not necessarily good, especially when even with current economy is changing and become much more contextual and much more transcending. That's another part of the economy. It kind of demands
But
that
I
as
think
well.
that there is a little bit more, and we are running a little bit at the end of our time. But I feel that there is a little bit more to that than just this kind of like almost a, I would say, cynical way of looking that somehow economy. There is kind of somebody makes decision to make people into smart machines.
No, it's not. Wait a minute, but think about that. How people justify. I actually believe politicians and everybody else, why we need schools, why we need expenditure for education. And the first thing they talk about, number one, competitiveness, economic competitiveness. Another thing they're talking about, upper mobility. All of this, it's about instrumentality.
I also see people who are most idealistic, that they believe there is a truth, like real truth, that anybody who is rational will come to that, and that maybe it's better to people to come to that on their own, but at the end they will come to the same truth because that's the truth. It's very ideological, not political at all, but really within the sphere.
But I was talking about ontology of this ideology.
Yeah.
In a way, what fits that ideology of the stable truth.
Right.
And in my view, what fits that, again, predictability, which coming from the way of our life, current life, it hopefully it will change. But I guess we're running out of time. Right. And this is an interesting question about this ideology of instrumentalism versus ontology of instrumentalism. And we, of course, we didn't discuss intrinsic, non-instrumental.
I guess will be left for the next podcast that will be pre-designed, or maybe during our live podcast, people will want to continue discussing what's the intrinsic dialogic pedagogy that's not used instrumentally, but just for continuing dialogic examination of the world. And so.
Yes, and before saying goodbye, today we are doing this podcast actually on Monday and not on Wednesday, as usually, because we will be actually having a reading group. We are discussing a book at the University of Delaware on that day. But another thing that I want to ask you, if you are familiar with live Facebook, please post on the Facebook how technically you recommend us to do that. Like, for example, we even don't know how to choose a good time for that. Fortunately, my personal semester hasn't started yet, but I don't know, is it better to during the day, in the evening?
Well,
and
we also have people from different time zones.
The different time zones. And what software we should use. We saw on the Facebook, and they recommend like 3 types of the software, and we don't know which one is better. Maybe you know more than that. So you experience that, please feel free to make suggestions. Thank you
Thank you
and goodbye
goodbye for today.
for today.